Targaryen lore, Aegon the Conqueror's secret vision, and the winter that was to come, Part 1, 15th. Dany's dream and the prophetic legacy. History says he conquered Westeros for glory. But what if Aegon's true motivation was a chilling nightmare? A vision that compelled him to unite kingdoms under sword and fire, to prepare the world for a winter that threatened the end of everything. Do you know the Conqueror's secret burden? The secret that shaped a dynasty and a continent? Prepare to unravel the primordial whisper that gave rise to the Targaryen Empire. In the realm of memory, even before Balerion, the black dread soared over the skies of Westeros, there was Valyria, a civilization of unparalleled splendor, where dragons were mounts, and magic was the very architecture of existence. House Targaryen, though they were dragon lords, were not among the 40 most powerful families, but they possessed a rare and terrible gift: dragon dreams. They could see the future, glimpse catastrophes, and this gift, often a curse, would be the salvation of their lineage. It was in this setting of power and magic that Dany the Dreamer was born, a young Targaryen whose vision would forever change her family's destiny. 112 years before the doom of Valyria, Dany had a dream. Not an ordinary dream, but a visceral and terrifying vision of the total destruction of Valyria, a cataclysm of fire and darkness that would engulf the greatest civilization the world had ever known. She saw volcanoes erupting, cities sinking, dragons dying. The terror was real, palpable, and she knew it was not just a nightmare. Dany's father, Aegon Targaryen, a man of unusual wisdom and unshakable trust in his daughter, acted upon this dream. He sold all his vast properties in Valyria, defied the scorn of his peers, and moved his family and his precious dragons to isolated Dragonstone, a rocky island in the narrow sea, while other dragon lords mocked and remained complacent, blind to the imminent danger. The Targaryens isolated themselves, carrying the secret of a prophecy that would soon become a devastating reality. The doom came, and with it, the spectacular end of Valyria. The tragedy was so absolute that its true nature remains a mystery to this day. Mountains erupted, rivers of fire flowed, and the earth opened up into a burning inferno. Only House Targaryen survived, the last lineage of dragon lords, protected by the prophecy of a young dreamer. This primordial event etched the importance of dragon dreams into the soul of every Targaryen, showing that prophecies were a real burden, and that listening to them could save their lives, or doom them. The gift of dragon dreams and prophetic interpretation did not end with Dany's. It became part of the Targaryen lineage itself, a secret legacy passed down from generation to generation. Not all Targaryens were dreamers, but many carried this sensitivity, this connection to the mystical and the future. The history of their house was imbued with prophecies, with legends of promised heroes and threats that would come from the shadows. As the Targaryen dynasty consolidated on Dragonstone, they kept themselves apart from the incessant wars of Westeros, watching the Seven Kingdoms tear each other apart. But they never forgot the lesson of Valyria, nor the greater purpose of their existence, the dragons. They were the last dragon lords, and their power was a gift and a burden. The knowledge of prophecies about a coming winter, a long night, and the need for a savior were an integral part of their identity. This secret knowledge was often passed down subtly, in whispers among the royal family members, or in ancient texts and codices guarded under lock and key. The importance of preserving pure Targaryen blood, and with it the ability to have dragon dreams, became a priority. They believed that the prophetic gift was the key to the survival of their house, and, ultimately, of the world. They were the guardians of a secret, and the responsibility to interpret and act upon these dreams was a burden that fell upon the shoulders of few. Aegon's childhood on Dragonstone was permeated by this atmosphere of ancient prophecies and the weight of history. He grew up in an environment where past and future intertwined, where the whispers of dragons and the warnings of a coming winter were as real as the salty sea wind. From from a very young age. Aegon had access to these ancient texts and the stories told by his grandparents and uncles, those who carried the legacy of the Dreamers. He was not a mere listener. He was a scholar, a questioner, and his mind was already dedicated to unraveling the enigmas of his house's destiny. Aerys to the Mad King would have his own distorted interpretation of prophecies, and Rhaegar Targaryen would become one of the most devout followers of the ancient words. But for Aegon, the vision that would change his life and the course of Westeros would come from a purer source, a profound understanding of his house's legacy. He inherited not only dragon blood, but also the burden of prophecy. As Aegon grew and matured, he did not just read the prophecies. He felt them. He experienced them. He had his own dragon dreams, visions that were not mere fantasies, but a terrifying glimpse of the future. These visions were not about glory or personal power, but about imminent destruction, a winter that would threaten all life. He saw the shadows, felt the cold, and understood the magnitude of the threat looming over Westeros. Aegon's interpretation of these prophecies was singular. He understood that his house, the last Dragon Lords, had a responsibility that went beyond their own dominion. He realized that Westeros' destiny was intrinsically linked to its people's ability to unite and prepare. The vision Aegon had was not just of a winter, but of an enemy that could only be faced by a cohesive and strong realm. He saw the kingdoms of Westeros, divided by endless wars, as easy prey for the darkness that would come from the north. He did not just see a problem, he saw a solution. Conquest would not be an act of ambition, but an act of necessity. He did not desire the throne for its own sake, but he wanted it as a tool, a means to an end. The Iron Throne would be the symbol of this forced union, the seat of the king who would have to lead humanity in the final war against the Long Night. This vision, this burden, this mission, he shared with his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys, who also possessed the sensitivity to understand the urgency of the prophecy. Aegon the Conqueror's secret vision was not a tale of glory, but a chilling nightmare that compelled him to forge a realm. He was not merely a conqueror, but a man tormented by a greater purpose, a burden he was destined to carry. In the next chapter, we will delve into the details of this icy vision. You will understand what Aegon truly saw about the coming winter, how this prophecy motivated him to begin the conquest, and how he shared this terrible burden with his sisters and his dragons. Prepare for the whispers of a prophecy that set a continent ablaze. The icy vision, what Aegon truly saw. Prince Aegon Targaryen possessed the gift of his ancestors, the power of dragon dreams. But his vision was not of glory or ephemeral conquests. It was a chilling nightmare, a terrifying glimpse into the future that would compel him to rewrite Westeros' destiny. It was not common ambition that forged his empire, but a secret burden, an icy prophecy that consumed him. What Aegon Targaryen truly saw in his dreams and visions was the return of the Long Night, not as a distant legend, but as an imminent reality, a terror looming over the world. His vision was visceral, a premonition that haunted him waking and sleeping. He saw the sun vanish from the sky, swallowed by a darkness that was not night, but an absence of light and hope. He felt the cold, a bone-chilling cold, a winter that stretched for generations, suffocating life and transforming the land into a frozen, endless wasteland. More terrifying still, Aegon saw the harbingers of this winter, the White Walkers, known in tales as the Others. He saw them, with their icy blue, glowing eyes, advancing silently, a legion of death in ice armor. He saw how they turned the dead into their servants, the Whites, an army countless and soulless, determined to wipe all life from West. Aegon's vision was clear. This was not a war of men against men, but an existential battle between life and death, between warmth and cold, between light itself and primordial darkness. He understood that this was a threat that transcended any order, any dispute over a throne. It was a force that would annihilate everything men had built. His conviction that this would happen again, that history would repeat itself, was his darkest truth. A knowledge that set him apart from all other kings in Westeros, who lived in their petty wars, oblivious to the true danger approaching. For Aegon, the vision was not just a dream, it was a call, a countdown to the apocalypse. Aegon's icy vision was not an isolated event in his mind. It connected directly to the oldest and most comprehensive of the prophecies in his blood, the Song of Ice and Fire. Aegon understood that the song was not merely a melody, but a prophetic warning about the threat he had envisioned. The history of his lineage, of Aegon the Conqueror, who had united Westeros under the shadow of dragons, was intrinsically linked to this primordial prophecy. He felt that his house was destined to play a crucial role in the fight against this darkness. The Azor Ahai prophecy, the legendary hero who emerged in the first long night, wielding Lightbringer, was also part of Aegon's understanding. He knew that a champion would be needed to face the darkness, and this prophecy echoed in his soul. The Targaryen maxim, "The dragon has 3 heads," which for many was just a family motto, for Aegon had a much deeper and literal meaning. He understood that not a single king, but a united leadership, composed of 3 dragon riders, would be essential to face the threat of the White Walkers. It was a vision of collective power, of a trinity of forces, for a greater purpose. This interpretation shaped his way of thinking about conquest and the future. His relentless search for ancient texts, for wisdom, and for any whisper that could confirm or detail this vision, was proof of his deep conviction. He studied the chronicles of the first long night, the legends of the first men, and the rituals of the children of the forest, seeking every piece of the puzzle that confirmed his vision. For Aegon, the destiny of Westeros, and perhaps the world, was not a Game of Thrones, but a mission of survival, a countdown to the final war. He felt the weight of this responsibility in every fiber of his being, and knew he could not fail. Terrified by the vision of winter and the inevitability of the long night, Aegon Targaryen looked at Westeros. What he saw was a fragmented continent, torn apart by centuries of incessant wars between the 7 kingdoms. The King of the Rock warred with the King of the Reach. The Storm King challenged the King of the Trident. 1,000 petty disputes consumed the blood and resources that would be desperately needed to face the greater threat. Aegon understood, with chilling clarity, that a divided Westeros would be a doomed Westeros. He knew that a realm in constant internal conflict, with exhausted armies and divided loyalties, would have no chance against the ruthless force of the White Walkers. Division was death. Unity was the only chance of survival. Thus, the conquest of Westeros was not, for Aegon, an act of selfish ambition for personal glory or power for power's sake. It was an act of desperate necessity, a brutal solution to an existential problem. He did not want the Iron Throne for its own sake, but he wanted it as a tool, the central symbol of a unified Westeros, capable of raising an army and a king to face the true enemy. His burden was immense, to force peace, to ensure survival. He would have to burn castles, subjugate kings, and cause immediate suffering, all to avoid infinitely greater suffering in the future. Aegon was not a reluctant conqueror, for he possessed the power and determination, but he was a conqueror driven by a grim purpose and a sense of duty few could comprehend. He was willing to be hated in the present so that the future would have a chance to exist. The weight of this vision, the magnitude of the threat, and the brutality of the solution were burdens Aegon could not carry alone. He shared his secret vision, his chilling prophecy, with his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys. Both, with their own dragon blood and their own prophetic sensitivities, were able to understand their brother's urgency. Visenya, the elder and the pragmatic one, grasped the relentless logic of the situation. She saw the need to use brute force, to crush resistance quickly, to unify Westeros efficiently. She understood that forced peace, though painful, was a lesser evil compared to the total annihilation Aegon had envisioned. She became the enforcer of Aegon's will, the one who ensured that unity would be achieved with decisiveness and power. Her strategic mind focused on how the conquest would be faster, more effective, so that the realm could prepare. Rhaenys, the younger and more mystical, felt the gravity of the prophecy on a more intuitive level. She understood the fated call, the destiny that awaited her house. Her softer nature inclined her to seek diplomacy and persuasion, but she did not hesitate to use her dragon when force was necessary. She saw the beauty in unity, even if forced, and the greater purpose of the mission. Rhaenys was the one who helped build bridges to ensure the loyalty of hearts, so that unity would be not only by force, but also by adherence. Together, the three heads of the Targaryen dragon, Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys, formed an unshakable alliance, united by a secret that transcended the world. Aegon's icy vision became their shared purpose, the driving force behind every act of the conquest. They were the only ones who saw the imminent shadow of winter, and they were willing to do anything to prepare Westeros for the final battle, for its very existence. Targaryen blood burned not only for a throne, but for life. Aegon's vision was clear, but the cost to his family would be unimaginable. The secret of the long night led him to conquer a continent. In the next Whispers of Westeros, we will delve into the early years of Aegon's reign and how the shadow of winter led him to forge a throne in blood and a realm in sacrifice. Prepare for the whispers of a burden that shaped the very foundation of the Targaryen Empire, the burden of the crown, consolidation, and sacrifice. Aegon's conquest was an unprecedented event, but the real battle began after the last sword was bent and the last king knelt. The burden of the crown was heavy, and for Aegon the Conqueror, that weight was amplified by the icy shadow of a prophecy. He was not just building an empire, he was building a shield, and every action, every sacrifice, was a step to prepare Westeros for the winter that was to come. After the forging of the Iron Throne and the submission of the Seven Kingdoms, Aegon's task was not merely to rule, but to unify. The realms were vast, their cultures and laws diverse, and their loyalties, often, still lay with their old kings and houses. The challenge was immense, to transform a collection of conquered kingdoms into a single cohesive entity, capable of withstanding an existential threat. Aegon understood that unity could not be achieved by force alone. He implemented a policy of clemency and integration. Those who bent the knee in time kept their lands and titles, though now, as vassals of the Iron Throne, he did not seek to annihilate the great houses, but to integrate them into his new system. The building of King's Landing, the new capital, was a symbolic act of centralization, a focal point for the new realm. However, the shadow of the winter prophecy hung over every decision Aegon made. He could not afford long internal disputes or loose administration. Every law, every appointment, every alliance was made with the threat of the White Walkers in mind. He needed a strong, efficient, and above all, united realm. The peace he imposed was a necessary peace, not peace for its own sake. He knew that time was a luxury Westeros did not have. The establishment of the King's Guard, an elite order of sworn knights, directly loyal to the king, was another step to consolidate central power. The creation of a unified legal code, though gradual, aimed to standardize justice and order throughout the realm. Aegon worked tirelessly to build an infrastructure that connected the kingdoms, facilitating communication and mobilization in case of need. Every brick, every legal measure, every coin was an investment in the future, a preparation for the final war against darkness. The unification of Westeros did not come without a price, and Aegon was aware of the sacrifices that would be demanded, both from his people and from his own family. The conquest, though swift, was brutal for some. Those who resisted were crushed, their castles burned, their lineages, at times, extinguished. The Field of Fire, where 2 kings were incinerated by dragons, was a grim reminder of Aegon's ruthlessness when confronted with resistance. He did not revel in cruelty, but employed it as a necessary tool to achieve his greater goal, unity. Aegon also made personal sacrifices. He married his 2 sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, a Valyrian practice that shocked Westeros customs. This union, though controversial, was seen by him as essential to maintain the purity of Targaryen blood, and with it, the gift of dragon dreams, which he believed to be vital for the realm's survival. His sons Aenys and Maegor would be the result of these unions, and their destinies would be shaped by Aegon's legacy and the shadow of prophecy. The burden of prophecy was a secret Aegon carried alone, or almost alone. He could not reveal to everyone the true reason for his conquest, for fear and disbelief could lead to chaos. He had to be the villain to some, the tyrant to others, all for the greater good. He accepted hatred and distrust, knowing that history would judge him, but that the future would depend on his actions. His solitude on the Iron Throne, cut by its blades, was a symbol of his personal sacrifice. The early years of Aegon's reign were marked by constant challenges. Sporadic rebellions arose in different parts of the realm, testing the newly formed unity. The Dornish, in particular, proved to be a thorn in the new king's side, resisting Targaryen conquest with unmatched ferocity. The war in Dorne was long and costly, and Aegon, for the first time, encountered an enemy that could not be subjugated by dragonfire alone. Furthermore, the vast expanse of the newly unified realm presented unprecedented administrative and logistical challenges. Maintaining peace among rival lords, establishing a fair tax system, and ensuring communication between distant regions were Herculean tasks. Aegon relied heavily on his counselors, many of whom were former enemies who now served the Iron Throne. Trust was a rare commodity, and paranoia a constant companion. Despite these challenges, Aegon never lost sight of his primary vision. Every crushed rebellion, every sealed alliance, every promulgated law was a step to strengthen the realm against a greater threat. He knew that internal stability was crucial for external survival. The shadow of winter compelled him to be ruthless when necessary, but also to be fair and pragmatic. He could not afford to fail. Aegon the Conqueror's legacy is multifaceted. For many, he was the tyrant who imposed his will on Westeros with fire and blood. For others, he was the visionary who united a continent and established a dynasty that would last for centuries. But for Aegon, his true legacy was preparation. He built a realm not for himself, but for the future, for the battle he knew was coming. Aegon laid the foundations for Westeros' defense. He built a naval fleet, fortified castles, and encouraged military training. He knew that when the long night came, the realm would need warriors, commanders, and unified leadership. He would not live to see the final battle, but his actions would ensure that Westeros had a chance. The Iron Throne, forged from the swords of his enemies, was not just a symbol of his conquest, but a constant reminder of his burden. The blades that cut him were an echo of the pain he endured to unite the realm. He was the king who ruled with a vision, a purpose that transcended politics and personal ambition. History would remember him as the conqueror, but he saw himself as the preparer, the man who lit a flame in the impending darkness. The shadow of winter continued to loom over the Targaryen dynasty, shaping the actions of its successors and influencing Westeros' destiny in ways he could never have foreseen. In the next chapter, we will delve into the challenges and prophecies that haunted Aegon's heirs. You will understand how the Conqueror's vision continued to guide the dynasty, even as they strayed from its original purpose. Prepare for the whispers of a burden that stretched for generations. The Vigilant King and the Legacy of the Secret. After the conquest, Aegon as fire had united Westeros, transforming 7 kingdoms into one. But for the Conqueror, The true battle was not over. The realm was seemingly at peace, but the icy vision of the coming winter, the shadow of the long night and the White Walkers haunted his every day. Aegon knew that his reign was not just about governing, but about constant vigilance, a silent preparation for a threat few dared to believe. Aegon the Conqueror was not a king who reveled in idleness. After the forging of the Iron Throne, he tirelessly dedicated himself to consolidating the realm, not merely for power, but for a survival strategy. His efforts to build a stronger, more cohesive Westeros were directly influenced by his vision of winter. He understood that infrastructure and internal unity would be the realm's greatest defenses against the approaching darkness. He ordered the construction of grand roads, like the King's Road, which would connect north to south, facilitating trade, communication, and, crucially, the rapid mobilization of armies in case of need. The laws of the Seven Kingdoms were gradually unified, replacing the myriad of local customs and edicts with a more consistent legal code, aiming for justice and order. Currency was standardized, and a unified tax system was established, ensuring the necessary resources to maintain peace and for future war needs. Every brick, every legal measure, every coin was an investment in the future, a preparation for the final war against darkness. His authority over the great houses was unquestionable. Aegon worked tirelessly to ensure the crown's authority over the great houses, preventing internal divisions that would weaken Westeros against the external threat. He knew that division would be an invitation to the long night, and that unity, even if imposed, was the only hope. Targaryen peace was a shield forged to protect Westeros from the true enemy. The burden of such a terrible prophecy was something Aegon did not want to carry alone forever. He tried to pass this vision on to his children, those who would one day inherit the Iron Throne and the duty to protect Westeros. However, reality proved cruel. The ability to see the future, to comprehend the gravity of the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, was not a gift that could simply be transmitted. His son, Aenys I, heir to the throne, was a gentle, kind, and artistic man, but he lacked the toughness and understanding of war that his father possessed. Aegon tried to share with him the horrors of the coming winter, the secrets of the White Walkers, and the need for constant vigilance. Aenys, in his dreamy nature, heard the words, but did not grasp their urgency. He did not see the chilling shadow with the same clarity as his father. His lack of resolve and his gentle nature made him unsuited for the burden of prophecy. Maegor I, Visenya's son and Aenys' brother, was a man of great strength and brutality. Aegon, in his search for an heir capable of facing the long night, may have tried to instill in him the truth of the prophecy, perhaps hoping that his strength would be useful. However, Maegor's cruelty and distorted pragmatism likely transformed any vision of prophecy into a pretext for tyranny rather than salvation. He saw power as an end in itself, not as a means to a greater purpose. Aegon felt the frustration and loneliness of being the only one to bear the weight of such terrifying knowledge. He had built a realm, but he could not instill in his heirs the same visceral understanding of the threat that motivated him. He watched his children, loving them, but also seeing them as perhaps unprepared for the true challenge Westeros would face. This was his greatest sadness, knowing what was to come and being unable to effectively pass on the burden. At the core of Aegon's strategy against the long night was the preservation and cultivation of dragons. For him, these magnificent winged beasts were not just symbols of power or tools of conquest. They were the last and most powerful line of defense against the approaching winter. Aegon understood that when the White Walkers returned, Dragonfire would be the only force capable of stopping them. He dedicated himself to ensuring that the Targaryen dragon lineage remained strong and healthy. Dragonstone, his family's ancestral home, was the primary center for dragon breeding and training. Aegon invested in their maintenance, ensuring that The dragons had the proper care and environment to thrive. He also expanded the dragon pit in King's Landing, a monumental structure built to house and contain the dragons, ensuring they were ready when the time came. Aegon also established and empowered the Dragon Keepers, those responsible for the care and training of dragons. He knew that knowledge about these creatures could not be lost, for it would be vital for the future. His dedication to dragons was a testament to his deep conviction in prophecy. Every egg hatched, every new dragon, was a step to strengthen Westeros against darkness. This priority in dragon preservation would be a lasting legacy, though, ironically, the dance of the dragons would come to decimate that very force. Despite his grand conquests and the glory of his reign, Aegon the Conqueror carried a quiet melancholy, the burden of knowing the imminent threat of the Long Night. While the world around him pursued petty political disputes and power games, was immensely isolating. He was a king, but also a prophet, a man haunted by knowledge he could not freely share. The Iron Throne, the symbol of his power, was also a constant reminder of his secret burden. The sharp blades that cut him were an echo of the pain and sacrifice he endured to unite the realm. Every wound was a memory of the violence he inflicted for a greater good and of the solitude of his mission. He was the powerful conqueror in public, but in private, he was the burdened visionary, the man who saw the shadow of winter where others saw the sun. This icy vision continued to guide all of Aegon's major decisions, even if the public reasons were different. Every peace treaty, every castle built, every law passed, was filtered through the lens of his preparation for the Long Night. His life was not just about building an empire, it was about building a shield for humanity. He lived with the certainty that the final war would come, and that his legacy would be defined not only by his conquest, but by his ability to prepare a realm to face it. Aegon the Conqueror departed, leaving behind a unified realm, but still largely unaware of the true threat. The long shadow of prophecy would continue to loom over the Targaryen dynasty, shaping the actions of its successors and influencing Westeros' destiny in ways he could never have foreseen. In the next and final chapter of this saga, we will delve into the fate of Aegon's vision after his death. You will understand how the prophecy was transmitted, distorted, and misinterpreted by Targaryen generations, and how the Conqueror's legacy became a dangerous inheritance. Prepare for the whispers of a destiny that unfolds for centuries, and of a prophecy that never dies. The Long Shadow and the Dangerous Inheritance. Aegon I, the Conqueror's icy vision, did not die with him. It loomed over the Targaryen dynasty like a long shadow, a secret legacy that would shape the actions of his descendants, sometimes for good, sometimes tragically. The prophecy of the coming winter, the burden of ice and fire, would pass from generation to generation, and its understanding, or its distortion, would determine Westeros' destiny. In the early Targaryen reigns, after Aegon, the vision of the Long Night, though not entirely forgotten, began to lose its urgency. Under the rule of Aenys I, Aegon's dreamy son, prophecy became more of a faded family legend, a distant tale. Aenys, with his gentle nature and his brief, troubled reign, lacked the strength or comprehension to bear the weight of this knowledge. The realm began to fracture, indicating a weakening of Aegon's preparedness. Jaehaerys I, the conciliator who ruled Westeros for over 5 decades, brought an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity. During his long and glorious reign, the Long Night prophecy was relegated to folklore, a distant threat in a time of warmth and abundance. The realm's prosperity, ironically, made people forget Aegon's lesson. Dragons, though still present, became more symbols of royalty than tools of war against a forgotten enemy. The burden of prophecy, then, became less of a priority and more of a family secret, awaiting an heir who could see it with the same clarity as Aegon. The brilliance of the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy would reignite forcefully in the figure of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Several generations after Aegon, Rhaegar, a scholar and a musician, rediscovered the true depth of Aegon's secret vision in his own dreams and in ancient texts. His mind was haunted by the long night and the need for a savior. He became convinced that Westeros' destiny depended on his interpretation of the prophecy. His obsession led him to believe that he himself was the prince that was promised, or that his lineage was destined to produce him. His interpretation of the three heads of the dragon led him to seek the union of ice and fire, Stark and Targaryen. This quest led him to Lyanna Stark. Rhaegar's tragedy lies in the irony of his actions. In his desperate attempt to fulfill Aegon's prophecy to generate the third dragonhead Jon Snow, he inadvertently ignited Robert's rebellion. His choices, though motivated by what he believed to be the greater good, led to the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty, the death of his family, and a chaos that, in turn, made the realm even more vulnerable to the threat Aegon had foreseen. Aegon's vision, though pure in its origin, became a dangerous inheritance in the hands of a prince who interpreted it tragically. The Long Night prophecy continued to be a dark force, and its most perverse interpretation would come with King Aerys too. The Mad King, Aerys, tormented by paranoia and madness, twisted the fire and blood and three heads prophecies in a terrifying way. He did not seek unity for salvation, but rather the rebirth of literal dragons and the purification of the realm through wildfire. Aerys believed that burning his enemies and even his own capital with wildfire would be the final act of Targaryen purification, a perverse echo of Aegon's original vision. This destructive obsession, fueled by his distorted interpretation, led directly to the sack of King's Landing. He wanted the city that betrayed him to be consumed by flames, and in his delusions, he would be reborn as a dragon from the ashes. Aerys' legacy is a grim reminder of how paranoia and madness can corrupt even the grandest purposes. His quest for dragons and a fiery end did not save the realm. Instead, it weakened it further, making it easy prey for the rebellion, and leaving it unprepared for the true threat Aegon had foreseen and Rhaegar had died to combat. Aegon's original vision was completely perverted by his descendants' madness. Despite the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty and the distortions of prophecy, the threat of the Long Night and the White Walkers never disappeared. The shadow continued to hang over Westeros, largely unrecognized by the new ruling powers. But the legacy of Aegon's vision and the burden of prophecy persisted, passing to the next generation. Jon Snow, Rhaegar's secret son, and Lyanna's, the perfect union of ice and fire, and Daenerys Targaryen, the last Targaryen, and the mother of dragons, who brought fire back to the world, became the true heirs to Aegon's vision. Their journeys, their struggles, and their sacrifices were directly shaped by the prophecy Aegon had sensed centuries earlier. They would be, in their own ways, humanity's last hopes against darkness. The realm Aegon had unified, and which was torn apart by the Targaryen wars, would again be called to unite. Aegon's secret vision, once a solitary burden, became an inheritance that shaped the destiny of countless lives. It was the driving force behind his conquest, the cause of countless tragedies, but also the seed of hope for the final battle. Aegon's legacy was not just an Iron Throne, but a prophetic warning that, through generations of fire and blood, finally found its true heirs in the fight against eternal winter, Daenerys Targaryen, from exile to the Queen of Ashes. In the next chapter of Whispers of Westeros, we will unravel the signs and choices that led to her tragic destiny, and how her story intertwines with the legacy of the Iron Throne. Prepare for the whispers of a queen who tried to break the wheel, but broke herself,